Welcome to episode 1 of Hobby Conquest. In this episode, I'm going to be painting the Space Marines from the first issue of Warhammer Conquest, the Warhammer 40,000 Partworks magazine series. So let's have a look at the colour scheme. I'm going to paint my Marines in the colours of the Iron Ravens chapter. Now this colour scheme was created by Paul Norton, who's a Games Workshop staffer, former army painter, and now a member of the Heavy Metal painting team. He created this scheme to be very easy to paint, achieving great results because you can put your effort into the contrasting colours, as you'll see the red and the blue and the gold. If you want to see more of Paul's work, I recommend looking him up on Twitter. I'll put a link up on the screen. For the armour, you'll need Leadbelcher base and Nuln Oil. For the joints in the armour, you'll need Abbaddon Black. The blue is Kantor Blue with a Calgar Blue highlight. The red is Mephiston Red with a Trollslayer orange highlight. And the gold is Retributor Armour with an Agrax Earthshade wash. The leather will be pure Rhinox Hide. Any flesh will be Bugman's Glow with Kislev Flesh highlight. And the basing will use Mechanicus Standard Grey with Celestra Grey. Also in the series I'll be using Zandri Dust with Ushabti Bone and Death Guard Green with Ogrin Camo. Right, let's get into the painting. So, got our primed Primaris Marine here. He's Leadbelcher spray, and what I'm looking for is just anywhere the spray hasn't caught properly, you know, where it's not going to get in just because of the angle that it's been primed at. So taking a pretty old brush, some Leadbelcher out of the pot and just work it into the sections, you know, thin it down a little bit, but in general this is pretty easy, you know, 5-10 minutes here, just picking up on any gaps, anything you're going to have missed with the spray, really help get good coverage, and then you can get on to the rest of the model. So this is pretty boring, don't want to watch too much of this, so I'll fast forward and we'll get on with the proper painting. Right, onto the wash stage. So this is a 50-50 mix of Nuln Oil Gloss and Nuln Oil. Reason for that is I think the gloss just looks a bit too glossy, a bit too fake when it's dried. It has its uses, but on a model where you're painting, you know, 70% of the model in one colour, to make it glossy, it's really gonna stand out. So a 50-50 mix just dulls it down, still leaves it a little bit glossy, you know, almost a satin finish, which is great for the armour. You know, you don't want to matte down the armour too much. So again, just get an old paint pot, mix the two together, and you're good to go. Now, in terms of putting it on, you've got, again, an old brush. You know, this is a really easy stage. The whole model's silver at this stage. You can get the wash everywhere, really. And you can almost not put too much on. I mean, if you do, if it's pooling in the wrong places, just take your brush, spread it out on the model. If you really have to, clean, you know, wash your brush out, dry it a little bit, and then use it to draw the wash away from the model. Apart from that, you know, make sure you get a good coverage everywhere. You're really looking to bring out those details, so you might need to go over a second time over some areas. You know, if you find you haven't got it pooling quite enough, just go back and give it another go, and it normally picks up again the second time. So, you know, one thing you can do if you've got some big smooth areas where you don't want the wash to affect the colour, you can just use your finger and wipe the wash off. You'll see me do that in a moment on the backpack of the Marine, just to clear the wash off the surface. But in general, you know, it's a really easy technique. You can make it look very effective. You know, you don't have to have great brush control. Get it where you want. There we go. Wipe a little bit off here and there, and pretty good. Next, using the Kantor Blue for the base. Now, this is on the shoulder pads, the knee pads, and the helmet. So what you'll see here is you'll see the paint will go on. It won't actually take very well because the gloss, the wash, because it's slightly glossy, means the paint tends to slide all over the surface. So what you've got to do is just, you've got to give it a couple of thin coats really. Now the important thing here is to use the angle of the model and the angle of the brush to make it really easy for yourself. So I'm using a pretty big brush here. It's a good quality brush. It's got a good tip, but you can make it a lot easier if you just get your brush at the right angle, get your model at the right angle. Use the shape of the model, the surface you're painting on, to help you work. Help you give you brush control. So here, keep my hands together. You see, I'm touching my hands together. That's a good tip. Really means you've got a bit of stability. And I'm coming in at an angle, working up to the edge of the shoulder pad. See, a little bit out of focus as my fingers get in the way, but see, change the angle. Now really, I've got two angles that I paint at. This angle here, where I'm just painting sort of as if you would write, and then this higher angle. Again, this really gives me two options of the way I bring my brush into the model. And by doing that and then changing the angle of the model itself can normally make it really easy. Trying to open up the surface you're painting on, or paint up towards an edge. If you paint towards an edge and your brush is in contact with the model, you can take your time, a little bit careful, and really stop just at the right moment. You see there, I'm just bringing it up to the edge, start in the middle, get my brush in control, and then there we go. Let's see, maybe need a touch up, bit of coverage again. You see, it's not given a quite adhered properly, so second coat. Again, angle of the brush, really important. I've got my two angles of holding it, sort of one high coming down and one sort of standard, almost like pen grip. Really means I can work my way in, start in the middle, come up to the edge. Really, really simple. Again, hands touching together, work the way in. Try and get some good coverage. Alright, I'll speed this up and we'll go on to the next bit. Okay, so next, blue on the helmet. So got to be this is a little bit trickier. But again, holding the rest of the model away from the paintbrush. So the first thing the paintbrush is going to come in contact with is the helmet. So really opened up the angle. I'm using my angle, my brush pointing down, really working my way in there. You can just see, making it easy for myself. I'm not trying to paint across part of the model, keeping the rest of it out of the way, and let the angle of the brush and the model do the work. Make it easy for myself. If I don't want to go into the eyes, I don't have to. Just coming across the top there. So that really helps with your brush control. Again, fingers touching, so I've got a good sense of where the model is. Good stability between my hands. And again, I'm resting my elbows on the surface, give myself stability. If you put all that together, you can get some pretty good brush control, and you can actually paint pretty quickly. Especially if you're doing these base colours, you don't need to make painting complicated. You can just have some simple techniques, good bit of brush control, neat and tidy, get some really good results. And you want to spend your time on the on the more difficult techniques, the highlighting, maybe some freehand. You want to, if you can get the basics down really quick and really simple, then you can speed up your painting, start painting, churning models out at a pretty good rate. That'll really help if you're painting an army. Again, this, as I mentioned, this type of painting is really for tabletop quality, but neat and tidy. These Marines, they're clean lines, nicely sculpted. It's not a dirty army. When we come to paint the Nurgle, we'll use some different techniques, be a bit looser. But with these guys, you got a nice clean finish on the armour. So you want a nice clean finish with the details, with the blue and the red and the gold. So, you know, being a little bit more careful now, but still pretty simple. Right, on to the blue highlights. So I'm going to do a line highlight here. So take my lighter blue, not a huge amount on the model, got a nice nice pointed tip to the model. Again, you get that just by shaping your brush a little bit when you on the palette. You know, when you pick up the paint, if you just turn your brush as you're picking it up, you'll get a nice point. And you know, just going to put a little highlight on the top of the knee pads here. Again, I'm trying to be neat, but I'll show you in a minute that even if you're not that neat and tidy, it doesn't matter. You can go back in with the darker blue. So you see on this knee pad, I'll come in, be a bit rougher, you know, bit of a thicker line. You know, that's almost the wrong angle to use there, and you'll see what happens. Wrong angle, get a line that's too thick, because you're trying to paint almost over the top of the round of the knee pad. If I'd have come down on top of that, like I did on the first one, it'd be a lot easier. So here, down on top, nice angle, fingers really together, lots of stability, and the movement is a pretty easy movement. I'm dragging my brush across in a nice direction. My fingers are moving across in a nice direction. Move the model, so I'm doing the same movement up here on a different part of the model. Again, same movement. Go back in, over the top. It's the same movement with my hands. You know, it's almost like a pencil stroke or something. You just, again here, I've changed the angle of the model, but I'm doing the same movement with my fingers. So it's the different angle of the, you know, it's the perpendicular to the previous line. But for me, for my hands, for my brush, it's in the same direction. So I'm, you know, going to get the same result, which is a thin line just along the edge. Again, turn the model, make it as easy as you can. There you go. As I said, you know, this is a nice, you know, only doing a single line highlight. We can come back in, or we'll come back in later on with the darker blue, and just, you know, even it out, tidy it up a little bit. You know, so if you get a little bit too much on, don't worry. Again, here, you see I'm pointing in a different angle now, different direction. Trying to find the best way just to have a little line. This is a bit tougher because you're not, you know, the movement's a bit jerky. It's not quite as smooth. That's a smoother line, smoother movement. But again, nice little result. You can always come back in with a darker blue and tidy them up. So move on to the other shoulder pad again. Get my fingers together. Just work it in. See, I think that where the brush is angled down, that's an easier movement on my hands. That's a smoother movement. But either way, I'm only doing two directions, two different paint strokes or brush strokes. You know, whenever I come to paint something, try and move the model into a good angle. You know, don't come in at lots of different ways of painting the same model. You know, moving the model's a lot easier if you keep your hands in the same position. Move the model around, find the right angle, just makes it relatively easy. There we go. So we'll speed this up a bit, move on to the helmet. So onto the helmet. Now again, this takes a little bit more care. But again, you can use the angles here. You can use the edges. You just want to pick them out, and that's, again, you're letting the model do the work. If you bring the model to the brush, you've got less chance that your brush is just going to touch part of the model you don't want it to. You know, your brush is staying still. You bring your model to it, and you're just doing the same movement. So you can pick up some small lines, again, find the right angle, make it fairly easy for yourself, and yeah, given we're only doing one highlight, we're only doing one highlight colour with these guys, so you can just pick out the details and you'll get a nice effect. Again, working around the back of the helmet here, just moving the model to find the right angle, keep the brush away from the areas you've already painted. But if you do touch something, you come back in later with the darker blue. Right, now I'm going to go back in with the darker blue and just tidy up some of these lines. So here I'm just chasing this line back a little bit, thinning it out. Now you'll be left with what looks like will be a really thin line, but if you do it in 2 stages, and again if you're working from the middle out towards the line, towards the edge, easier to control the brush once it's on the model. So again here, this was the thicker line, just showing you if you did have a thick line to start with, very easy to make it thinner. Find the right angle, get the brush on the model a little bit away from the line and just work your way towards it. Makes it really, you're really in control. And there you go. So I'll go around the model just touching up a few of these lines, and then we'll move on to a different colour. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in and just touch in these this sort of black joints, these joints, just drop a bit of black into them, make them dark, see if it's some sort of material coming through. So again, concentrate on finding the right angle, make it easy. I mean, if you do get black on the silver, it's not the end of the world. A little bit of Leadbelcher over the top will soon tidy it up, but the neater you can be, the more time you'll save. So again, just thinning the black a little bit so it flows off the brush. If I have to go back in, do 2 coats, that's fine. Really make it easy for myself, find the right angle, just work the brush in. But again, this is the step that if you're really new, if you're really starting out, maybe just do the bigger areas. Don't worry about just do the main areas behind the knees. Don't worry about the tops of the thighs, because you won't notice it too much. Again, same with the highlighting. If you're really starting out, just concentrate on getting the blue into the shoulder pad nicely. Don't worry about the highlights. You can always come back and put them back in once your brush control has got a little bit better. But again, a couple of coats here, nice, fairly thin paint. It's going to flow nicely. I'm not going to have to try and force it in. Be left with a blob where I don't want a blob. Just a couple of thin coats works really well. And again, I'm using a pretty big brush, but because it's got a good point, it's actually fairly easy to work with. So yeah, we'll just touch these up and move on to the next stage. Right, so onto the red. So yeah, a little bit thinned down with my base red, my Mephiston Red. Again, coming in at an angle where I'm going to be contacting a fairly big part of the model, and then can work on spreading the paint out towards the edges. Again, if I'm coming down this side here, just turn the model so my hands are at the same angle as before. Move the model at the right angle, and again, it's very easy then to run your brush along that edge, not come too far onto the blue of the helmet, and then you're not having to go back and at this stage tidy up. You can just a couple of goes, let it dry a little bit, come back, go over what you've done again, nice and easily. Turning the model, doing the same strokes as before with the brush, just finding the right angle on the model to get a good contact. Now here, you're going to come straight down again, use the centre, start in the middle, work your way out. I'm pulling away from the model as I come down to the bottom, so I'm not coming down onto the lower part of the visor, and then tidy up the other way. Again, turn the model, make it easy for yourself. Again, when I want to do the other line, or the other side, I'll find a different angle. I won't try and do both lines with the model in the same direction. There we go, different angle. Keep my brush stroke simple. So on to highlighting the red. Now, I'm not highlighting here with orange. I actually highlighted with a light red, and then finished the model and thought it just doesn't pop enough. So I went back over with the orange. But here again, what I'm doing is getting the right angle with the model. Keep my fingers together, hands touching, and highlight the easier parts first. Where highlighting the edge, where you can just draw the brush along the edge to catch it, that's an easy bit, and then onto these more difficult bits here. So got to be a little bit careful, but again, I'm making the same brush strokes that I was earlier when I was doing my line highlighting on the shoulder pads. So I've just got the model in the right position to make the same stroke, and again, if you practice those strokes enough, then that's how you're going to get them under control. So just going back in here with the base red, just to neaten up those highlights, make them look a bit thinner and a bit crisper. Right, onto the gold. So this is Liberator Gold, really nice colour, covers really well. So again, a little bit watered down, not too much, onto the brush. Start with a nice big area, work your way towards the edges, keeping the brush away from the bits we painted so far. So again, brushes at a very similar angle you've seen before. Turn the model, then I can see the edge, and that's really important. Then I can see what I'm doing, I can see where the point of the brush is getting towards the edge, and I can just pick up those, paint out towards the edge and stop with a good degree of control. You see how the gold really brings the model together, really gives it a focal point in the centre. Again, we're going to do gold on the edges of the shoulder pads. I'm not going to paint underneath the shoulder pads, I'm just going to go on the surface if it's been sort of gilded on. Again, get it at a nice angle. Okay, so you notice, so doing the gold, I just touched onto the shoulder pad where I shouldn't have done. So again, just go back in, tidy it up. So onto the wash. So Agrax Earthshade. I haven't got gloss. Again, trying to cut down the number of paints we use. I'm just using normal matte Agrax Earthshade. Over this size part of the model, it's not really going to matter. So again, not being quite so liberal with the wash this time. Trying to be a bit more controlled, because you don't really want to get it on the silver metal, just on the gold. Again, a couple of coats is probably better, just helps to give it an extra deeper contrast. So moving on to one of the details is this purity seal. Using the same red and the same orange highlights as the red armour and the gun will do later. Again, that's to cut down on the number of paints we use. It's not really going to notice the difference. If it's not worth buying a new paint just to do this if you're starting out. You've got a red, you've got a highlight. You can go with that. If you want to change the colour or to get some contrast, add a couple of coats of Agrax Earthshade in. That just helps the purity seal get some depth. So now I'm doing the sort of the leather. So I'm using a Rhinox hide here on the belt and any sort of pouches. And I'm not going to highlight this because it's pretty dark colour anyway. It's well hidden on the model. It's underneath the backpack. Underneath the armour, underneath the shoulder pads. It's going to be in shadow anyway. So you don't really want to draw attention to it by highlighting it too much. So now just nipping back to the purity seal and doing the parchment. So I'm using Zandri Dust, another very common colour that you'll need. You can use it in a lot of situations. A lot of models have details that are going to be sort of paper, or you can use it as a base for things like horns, and we'll use it on the Nurgle models. So again, very useful to pick up. So on to a highlight. This time just a little bit of Ushabti Bone. Very easy stage, so we'll speed this up and get on to further details. Okay, so a little detail here, just some Agrax Earthshade mixed with a little bit of black, just to thin it out, make something that flows off the brush quite well. And this is a little detail that really easy to do if you've got a good bit of brush control. Putting some lines on the parchment just to simulate some writing. Again, very simple, very effective, doesn't take very long at all. The final piece to paint is the red casing on the bolt gun. Now this took the longest out of any piece in the model because there's so many different angles to paint. The techniques are the same I've described before. So let's speed this up, listen to some jazz and see the result at the end. So here's the finished model, and as you can see, even though we've used a limited number of paints, if you have a good paint scheme, good contrasting colours, and you're neat and tidy, you can achieve great results in a short space of time. So on to the basing. For this series I'm going to use a simple 5-step process. The first step will be PVA and sand, the second will be a base coat of watered down dark grey, followed by a dry brush of a light grey, then a wash of Agrax Earthshade, and then black edging to finish it off. Now I use grey rather than brown for the bases because brown doesn't look good on an urban battlefield. But then I use a Agrax wash rather than a black wash just to give a little bit of earthy tone. If you use black, the whole thing just looks too grey. There's not much in the way of tricky details here, so let's put some more jazz on, speed the whole thing up, and I'll see you in a minute. So here are the final 3 models. As you can see, we've still got the markings to do, but that's okay. They're great for the tabletop at this stage. Once we've got a few more Marines painted, I'll get some transfers and we'll do the markings all in one go. The other things we might do include adding some tufts to the base. But for now, that's the end of episode 1 of Hobby Conquest. Hope to see you again next time.